everybody, my name's Ryan and this is Ask the Pastor. The internet can send me any question they want and I have to answer it. That can be anything from a complicated, toothy theological issue that I've got to do a bunch of research for, to something silly. Today, for instance, I'm answering this question from Elizabeth Clark. She asks, Star Trek or Star Wars? That might seem like a kind of silly question that's more small talkish, but the joke's on you, Liz, because I am about to get ridiculously nerdy about it. So to start with, I am going to give you a unambiguous answer to the question, but I have to say, I have to hedge at the beginning to say it's kind of an apples to oranges comparison. Right? Like, I would argue Star Wars is more comparable to something like Lord of the Rings, and Star Trek would be most analogous to Doctor Who. Star Wars is a mythic space opera. It is based on Joseph Campbell's conception of the monomyth, which is the sort of story that undergirds all stories. The story of the peasant who becomes the squire, who becomes the knight, who overthrows the evil king and saves the princess, returning home to give boons to his fellow man. That's what Star Wars is. It's what Lord of the Rings is. It's what many of the most epic stories in society are. King Arthur and the basis for many of our religions. Arguably, the Jesus story is related to that story. So to be playing in those waters with an epic trilogy of movies that form this base of understanding, that to me is a very different thing from what Star Trek is doing. Star Trek being a long-running series of TV shows that provide social commentary. And that social commentary is kind of more traditional of the role of science fiction. That's what science fiction is supposed to do. It's supposed to be a mirror that shows us ourselves. Star Trek does it very well. But it turns out you can compare apples and oranges. Contrary to popular folk belief, they're both fruits, they both grow on trees, and they're commercially popular in the United States for juicing, and if I had to pick, I prefer apples. Similarly, if I compare Star Wars to Lord of the Rings, I'm going to pick Star Wars, and if I compare Star Trek to Doctor Who, I'm going to pick Doctor Who. So, in all circumstances, Star Wars wins over Star Trek. I'm sorry. I do like Star Trek. There's nothing about liking Star Wars that makes me hate Star Trek. In fact, I've really gotten into Star Trek Discovery lately. I was a little late to the train in the Star Trek Next Generation era. But there is one area where the comparison, Star Trek or Star Wars, I think is very apt. In a lot of ways, I think it's not apt. They're just not comparable. But there's one area that I think is really interesting. In Star Wars, the camera follows Luke Skywalker and Han Solo. It follows the Rebel Alliance, people who rise up to overthrow a oligopoly, a large hegemonic group called the Empire, who control multiple planets in a conglomeration. In Star Trek, we follow Picard or Kirk, and they are members of the Federation, which is this large socialistic, hegemonic bureaucracy that controls and maintains peace in a large group of planets in a conglomeration. And so, essentially, the question, Star Trek or Star Wars, can be phrased also as, would you rather be a member of the Federation or a member of the Rebels? Are you a person who wants to root for heroes who do their heroism by becoming part of the system and by working together with others in an organized, structured way? Or do you want to root for the kind of heroes who break rules? Do you want to root for the kind of heroes who operate outside of society's norms and structures? And that's interesting to me because I just said Star Wars. I am, as a pastor, the kind of pastor who wants to experiment with online ministry in a different way than I've seen it attempted before. And I want to ask questions about how it is we engage the people who haven't previously been engaged in church, and I want to bend rules. I want to do that for good purposes. I'm not interested in just sowing chaos for the sake of chaos, but I'm interested in being chaotic good. Whereas I think a lot of people think of pastors and they think those have got to be Star Trek fans. Those have got to be people who want to join the Federation, who want, especially if you're a part of a rigid denomination like the Presbyterian Church USA. You know, that's so Federation-like. And indeed, many of us are. There are plenty of people in my denomination who really like rules and regulations and think that keeps us safe and that makes the world a better place. And in some ways it does. But it's actually a pretty interesting personality indicator to ask the question, do you prefer Star Trek or do you prefer Star Wars? I'd put the question back to you, and I hope you'll answer it in the comments. Which one do you prefer? Which series do you enjoy more? And do you think you line up with that association? If you prefer Star Trek, would you say you're a rule follower? If you prefer Star Wars, would you say you're a rebel? I hope to hear from you, and I will see you next week on Ask the Pastor. Oh, hey, I forgot to mention, if you've got your own question, I would love to hear that. You can post it in the comments below, and I will make a video for your question too. If you want to watch more questions that I've answered, some of them are up here. You can also do a search on the page, and you can subscribe to it right there. Think about that. Bye.